Honorable Minister Carrie Simmons, Honorable Lisette Martinez Luzado, Deputy Minister of Culture of Venezuela, Cuban Ambassador, Her Excellency Janet Stabel, His Excellency Ambassador Matthew Stabel, Her Excellency Ambassador Tonika Seeley, distinguished guests, noted artists Adrienne Auger and Sheena Rose, colleagues and friends. My name is Dr. Marielle Barrow-Megan, and I'm the curator of the Big Conversations series. This evening, we celebrate the end of a successful series where we stand at the intersection of labor, arts, and youth. And the questions before us are urgent. Are we truly catering to the multiple intelligences of our youth? Are we building systems where their creativity is not only celebrated, but professionalized, dignified, and remunerated? How do we ensure succession planning and industry growth so that the next generation of Caribbean creators is not left to chance, but anchored in vision and opportunity? At the heart of these questions lies our shared responsibility to unify the Caribbean through cultural imagination and industry planning. Big Conversations has been more than a forum. It has been a marker in a continuum. It is my hope that this will not end here, but that it becomes a living thread, extending far beyond Carifestaxv, binding us together in purpose, practice, and in possibility. Consider this an official invitation to join our continuum, to carry forward the spirit of this forum, and to ensure that the conversations begun here bear fruit across our region. This evening, I also raise again the flag of Haiti in solidarity and in love. My connection is both professional and personal. Research and documentation of Haitian arts practices, as I mentioned yesterday, formed nearly half of my doctoral thesis. Later, I had the honor of publishing this 180-plus page journal on Haitian creativity and resilience. But above all, Haiti lives in my home and heart. My daughter carries Haitian blood in her veins. When we uplift Haiti, we uplift the Caribbean soul. In closing, I wish to express profound gratitude to the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley for her courage in bringing this new forum of big conversations into Carifestaxv, and for entrusting me with the privilege of curating such a vital platform. To the National Cultural Foundation, to our festival director, Carol Roberts, artistic lead, Michelle Cox, and to my extraordinary team. There are no words to capture the depth of my pride. You have risen to the occasion, carried the weight of the vision and transformed it into living reality. I invite you now to join me on stage so that we may acknowledge you together. Ms. Kimberly Cummins and Mr. Mark Holder. Finally, to all gathered here, this is not farewell. This is a beginning. Let us leave this space committed to the work ahead, united by our art, our labor, and our youth. Let us continue the continuum. Good evening, everyone, and I'm going to pass on to Kimberly to invite our first guest to the stage.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome again to the Bay Conversation. Before we are edified by today's session, I want to invite, to the stage. I want you to sit back and enjoy as we invite to the stage the ensemble from the Welch's Primary School to treat us to some Bajan classics.
Thank you to our young performers. We can see who's going to come out, as a big performer on the stage, right? Doing her little dance. That was lovely. Thank you. We now welcome to the stage Mr. Adrian Auger, and I'm going to, sorry, Mr. Adrian Clark. There are two Adrians here today. And we will allow him to introduce his song for this evening. And Adrian is one of Barbados's noted voices, so we're honored to have him here with us this evening.
Hello and good evening. Or should I say good early, late afternoon? Good evening at work. Okay. Everybody good? You all enjoying Carifestaxv so far? You saying yes. Were you enjoying? Good answer. Good answer. We can say, I hope you enjoy what I get to do up here now. And if you don't, please lie. I bruise easily. What are you joking? All right, I've been asked to do a couple of numbers here, so I hope, as I said before, that you all would enjoy something quite Bajan. All right, then. All right. Spooge music. We can start with that, right? Goodie. I need someone to have faith in me. I need someone just to love me when I'm right, to love me when I'm wrong. I love a love that's all so strong. Faith can move a mountain. Faith can calm the sea. Faith can stop a hurricane. I get it down and take it back to the sea. Yeah. Y'all know this song? I need someone. I want to sing it the other side, but that's all right. That's all right. We can sing this next one out. Oh, yeah. We just had a little celebration there for Jackie Opo. You remember that, right? All part of Carifestaxv 15. And it goes something like this here. Your love is lifting me higher than I've ever been lifted before. So keep it up, quench my desire, and I'll be by your side forevermore. I said your love is lifting me higher, higher. I said your love is lifting me higher, lifting me higher and higher. There's another one made popular by Richard Stout, the late. Well, I'm a friendly stranger in a black sedan. Would you hop inside my car? I got pictures I can carry. I'm a lovable man. I can take you to the nearest star. I'm your vehicle, baby. I take you anywhere you wanna go. I'm your vehicle, woman. But now I'm sure you know that I need you. I want to, got to have you, child. Great God in heaven, you know I love you. Oh, you know I do. Say I need you. I want to, got to have you, child. Great God in heaven, you know I. Jackie Ripple again, all right? Hey, no use of you coming on your bended knees. You done me wrong, now I can hear your plea. What to say? You're no good, no good. You ain't no good at all, no good. Man, you hear what I say? You're no good. Hey. There comes a time when you must try. You never miss the water until the well runs dry. The use. You're coming on your bended knees. You've done me wrong. Now I can hear you. Please, you ain't a good, no good. You ain't a good at all, no good. Man, you hear what I say? You're no good. You're no good, no good. You're no good. Hey, hey, hey. All right. Thank you. That song was not about me, all right? Just clearing the air. I didn't born yet when this song was popularized. Supposed to do another one, right, Kimberly? I can do one here made popular about 30 years ago with a group called the Troubadours. Called Nice Time. Some of y'all ain't old enough to know it, but 30 years ago. So my master helped me write that song was recorded in 1995. Waiting on it. A nice one from the Doors. And they too were in the garden for this Spooge celebration. Nice time. Woy, ay, oy. And you're free to dance in your seats, all right? Come on. La la dee la 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 la. Hey. So what you know? Is it in the place, the session running wild? Party people behaving real bad. I know that you love to jam the raga soca style. Well, this one is sure to drive you mad. So come and let me see you. Slow down the pace. Throw back the waist. On my command, it's time to jam. If you know it, sing, oh. Y'all sound good, yeah? Oh, we having a, oh, we having a, oh, we having a nice time. Can you feel it? Wind up, can you feel it? Shake up, can you feel it? Push back, can you feel it? On the attack, oi, oi, oi. Woy, I think die. Woy, ay, oh. La la dee, la 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 la. Hey, hey. People, we don't need to throw no towel in the air. We don't need to jump and prance around. We don't need no donkey, horse, no mule inside of fear. We just jam into this ragga song. Let me see you wanna bouncy. Swing to the left, swing to the right. Pure stamina, jamming all night. Sing again. Oh, we having a. All right. Oh, we having a. Come again. Oh, we having a nice time. Oh, we having a nice time. Can you feel it? Wind up, can you feel it? Shake up, can you feel it? Push back, can you feel it? Oi, oi, oi. Now I know we have people here from all across the region. Anybody here from Cuba? Venezuela? I ain't gonna start you Spanish because I will fail hard. Anybody here from Trinidad? All you. Bajans, where are you? I can see some Asians in here. I don't know where you're from, but wherever you're from, let's here. Put your hand in the air like this. Come on. Oi, oi, oi. Wind it down, pon your man. Yes. All of the Cubans. Yes. Even the Venezuelans. Come on. All of the trainee. My Bajan posse. Now listen to me. Hear this now. People, come and listen to me. You just grab on your partner around the body and just wind it up, When it done, good Lord. Come and say when it all around. You just stand up there, hand in the ear. When it up, shake up your bamsy with flair. Yes, man, woman, child. Come on, everybody, me say this is just a while. Just slow down the pace, throw back the waist. On my command, it's time to jam. Let me hear my chorus. A little louder. Sounding good. And I can't hear the Trini at all. All right, can you feel it? Wind up, can you feel it? Shake up, the song is done. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clark. That was quite the enjoyable, closure of our event in terms of performances. And it is my pleasure to welcome my close collaborator on the Big Conversation series, Ambassador David Comijong, to the stage to moderate our panel. I also want to acknowledge in the audience one of our sponsors, Afro-Exim Bank, Mr. Ijerka. I'm not going to try to pronounce your first name, Mr. Ijerka. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And also to acknowledge CAF, another one of our sponsors, and Dr. Stacy Richards-Kennedy spoke with us at the opening ceremony for our Big Conversations. So I shall pass this over to a qualified, discussion.
Thank you, Mariel. And let me in turn invite to the stage Honorable Kerry Simmons, Miss Gloria Rolando, Dr. Adrian Oj, Miss Zaida Davis, and Miss Kimberly Agard. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to discuss the topic, we, the people of the Caribbean, mapping out the future we want. And as you would have heard, this is the final big conversation. This is actually the concluding big conversation. And so this topic was chosen very carefully. We have had a whole series of conversations about everything under the sun pertaining to the Caribbean. We started with a big conversation on our Caribbean civilization with Prime Minister Motley and Gonzalez and Dr. Suma and Sir Hilary Beckles. And since then, we have tackled many, many subjects. Decolonization, Cuba, Haiti, climate change, many, many areas of the arts, the technique of the arts, the business of the arts. And we thought that we should close out the series by looking at, after all that talk, what do we want for our Caribbean nations, for our Caribbean region, for our Caribbean civilization? And when we conceptualized this Carifestaxv 15, a big part of the thinking was a determination to reconnect Carifestaxv with the original intention of the creators of Carifestaxv way back in 1970. And, there was a group of writers and artists that met in Guyana in February of 1970 who conceptualized this regular Caribbean Festival of Arts. And the famous Guyanese writer and editor, A.J. Seymour, I think he expressed it best way back in 1970. I think he best expressed what needs to be the fundamental reason and the fundamental objective of Carifesta. And I want to share with you that statement, which I think really should be the motto of any Carifesta. And this is what he said way back in 1970. The creative artists of the Caribbean have a very special cultural burden to bear and a very demanding role to play in the total social and political development in the region. They are involved in an unwritten educational program and praxis for all the people. In short, the Caribbean cultural contributors must see themselves as a vanguard who will help to liberate the creative energies of the Caribbean people and help all our societies to create a new life out of the chaos of underdevelopment. And that was the original conception of Carifesta. And that brilliant idea was developed back in 1970, and I think we need to call the names of some of these great Caribbean artists who put this festival together and who have since joined the ancestors. People like Kamau Brathwaite, Sam Selvin, Austin Tom Clark, Michael Gilks, John LaRose, Yan Carew, Ken Cosby, Beryl McBurney, V.S. Reed, Ivan Van Sertima, Ray Luck, Wilson Harris, Sheikh Keane, Aubrey Williams, and of course, A.J. Seymour and Andrew Salke, among several others. These are just perhaps the most prominent names, but we must never forget them. And Kamau Brathwaite, our great Barbadian artist and intellectual, he made the point after the first Carifesta was held in 1972, he made the point that is central to what we are going to be doing here this afternoon. And permit me to quote him as well. He said, Carifesta, I said in 1972, after the first Guyana event, was one of the most important events since emancipation. And from the cultural point of view, it was the most important event since emancipation, since it was the only time that artists from all over the Caribbean have been able to meet together in one place for a common purpose over a fair period of time, and meet not only formally, but even more importantly, informally. Additionally, and this was really the beauty of it, able to meet also in the same space and for the same purpose, a pan-Caribbean audience or public. So understand what he's saying. The beauty and power of Carifesta is not just that the artists of the Caribbean come together, but that the artists of the Caribbean come together, and they come together also with the people of the Caribbean. And out of that melding of artists and people comes something magical, something fundamental, something to liberate creative energies, something to bring about development. And so that is at the heart of what we will be doing this evening. We want to have a sharing. We intend, many of these big conversations have been about the panelists speaking to each other. And quite often time has run out and we have not been able to have the engagement with the audience, the people of the Caribbean. That will not happen this evening. We want this big conversation to be very participatory and interactive. So we are going to want to hear from you, members of the audience, your ideas, your questions for the panelists, but your own comments and ideas and even critique, but positive ideas as well as to what Caribbean do we want and what are the ideas you wish to have taken on board. So having said all of that, permit me now to introduce our panelists. I start with the gentleman on my immediate right, the Honorable Kerry Simmons, Member of Parliament, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Barbados, and Senior Minister coordinating the productive sector. Kerry is an attorney at law, called to practice both in Barbados and at the bar of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. In addition to being a general litigation practitioner, Minister Simmons is also an international trade law practitioner and maintained an extensive practice offering consultancy services to a number of states across the Caribbean. Kerry has been a member of the legislature of Barbados for in excess of 21 years and has served in both houses of parliament. He has served, in addition to serving as Minister of Foreign Affairs, he has also served as Minister of Tourism and International Transport, Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship. So we will hear from Minister Simmons, and you will note that this panel has been chosen very carefully. They represent different spheres of activity, and I dare say different points of view. So Minister Simmons, being the man of government on this panel, and being a Minister of Foreign Affairs, he may very well wish to address this topic in relation to the Caribbean having an independent and non-aligned foreign policy. He may wish to look at issues pertaining to peace and a diplomacy of peace, maybe the Bridgetown Initiative, maybe our outreach to Africa as we forge new relations, perhaps even our reparatory justice campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, please make Minister Simmons feel very welcome here this evening. Our second panelist is Miss Gloria Rolando. She comes from the north of the Caribbean, from the wonderful Republic of Cuba. Gloria is an iconic Afro-Cuban film director and screenwriter. Gloria's documentaries, and there are many of them, play an important role in documenting the African diaspora in the Caribbean, helping to preserve its cultural and spiritual values. For example, Ogun, an Eternal Presence, her 1991 documentary dedicated to those who upheld the African Yoruba religion in Cuba. We can also cite, very important for us, Bajans and Jamaicans, Footsteps in Baragua, which looked at the Barbadian and Jamaican and wider Anglophone West Indian presence in Baragua in Cuba. And Gloria has produced more than a dozen award-winning documentaries. And so Gloria, speaking from the vantage point of a Cuban filmmaker, may wish to in addressing this topic, to look at national and even regional arts and culture policies and programs. She may wish to examine the Caribbean as an anti-imperialism zone in light of some of the issues that Cuba faces, and generally the place of Cuba within our Caribbean civilization. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Gloria Rolando, please make her welcome. Next to Gloria is Dr. Adrian Oje, a poet, producer, and creative consultant. He is a son of St. Lucia, but he has been active across many sectors across the Caribbean: art, media, theater. He has published works which span poetry, plays, articles, lectures, and essays. He has made a contribution both as an artist and as a development economist. He advocates for leveraging creative industry into mainstream economic development. He is the recipient of many awards, including Entrepreneur of the Year in 2010, Caribbean Laureate of Arts and Letters, also 2010, St. Lucia Medal of Merit, Gold in 2016. He has served as an independent senator in the Parliament of St. Lucia, and for his contribution to regional development and culture, he received an honorary doctorate from the University of the West Indies in 2012. And with that kind of background, we would expect that Dr. Auger may also look at arts and culture policies and programs for our Caribbean region. He may look at the type of democratic consensus that should bind and guide our societies, perhaps how to deepen and enhance our Caribbean integration movement, maybe even new models of economic development as we go forward. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Adrian Auger. And next to Dr. Auger is the youth of our panel. Miss Zaida Davis is a proud Vincentian. She is a passionate student leader, currently pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Management at the Cave Hill campus of the University of the West Indies. Zaida is the Vice President of CARICOM Relations of the University of the West Indies, Student Today, Alumni Tomorrow program. In fact, the Cave Hill chapter of the program. And Zaida is also President of the Vincentian Students Association. She is passionate about regional development, youth empowerment, and the intersection of business, policy, culture, and creative strategy. And so, Zaida, maybe you will look at the place and role of youth in national and regional decision-making. Maybe the need to craft societies that our youth can feel proud about. Maybe you will look at issues pertaining to education, and specifically the University of the West Indies. Ladies and gentlemen, let us make Zaida feel welcome here this evening. And finally, how could we have big conversations without having the voice of labor, without having the voice of the trade union movement? And we are very privileged to have with us this evening an outstanding trade union leader from Barbados, Miss Kimberly Agard. Kimberly is the president of the National Union of Public Workers here in Barbados. This is actually Barbados' second largest trade union after the Barbados Workers Union. It is the main union of public workers in Barbados. Kimberly has been the president since 2021, and she's had a long history in the National Union of Public Workers. We call it the NUPW. She is a former third vice president and Youth League chairperson of the NUPW. In addition to her service nationally in Barbados, Kimberly is currently the third vice president of the Caribbean Congress of Labor. She is also a former president of the Caribbean Public Services Association, the CPSA. And I should say that Kimberly is a career public servant. She has worked in the public service of Barbados since the year 2000. She has served 18 years at the Barbados Statistical Service, and she is currently employed at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs. And speaking from the perspective of labor, the role and place of the trade union movement, central to our Caribbean civilization, the type of public service we want and need, perhaps issues pertaining to gender equality, Kimberly, the goal of a people and worker-centered society. Ladies and gentlemen, make Kimberly feel welcome here this evening. So, having introduced this panel, we want to go now, we want to hear from the panelists. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give an opening statement, but I want that opening statement to be their fundamental statement. The things that they have come here today to say, to really put on the table, to get off their chest. Because once we do that, those opening statements, I want to open up to you, members of the audience, to respond to those statements, pose questions, make your own comments. So I want us to get into the discussion immediately after these fundamental statements of position by the 5 panelists. So we start with Honorable Kerry Simmons. Kerry? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. If you ask me to give you an opening statement which helps me to make a case to map out the future that I would want to canvas with the audience as being the future that we should want, then permit me to begin on 2 limbs. The first limb would be the intersection with our psychology as a people and our sociology. And then the second limb would be a very simple limb of our politics. I want to begin with that point of intersection between the psychology and the sociology of the Caribbean people, because we have to be ever mindful that we are relatively unique in the world. We are a collection of very fragile little islands, which are today very fragile microeconomies. But we were all forged in a crucible of colonialism, racism, slavery, and several other demeaning and inhumane, dehumanizing experiences, much associated with that. And as we go forward into the future that we want to be able to build, I think it is very important that we always remember where we came from, so that we do not make the mistakes of the past as we build our way for the future. And that means that as a community of nations, we have to be very mindful of our civilization, those things that we value dearly, those principles that we have to hold on to as a people, forged as those principles have been by a common experience. It means, therefore, that we have to revise and review many of the things that we do today and that have done historically. On this panel, we have labor represented, and one of the things we must do is to make sure we, at all times, in all places in the Caribbean, bring dignity to labor, that we make sure labor is inclusive in our policy making, that we make sure that we are able to give the average worker in the Caribbean upward social mobility in the context of dignity. The same principle applies to our education. We have to decolonize our education system. We have to make the education system which we inherited from the British an education system that is more relevant and more purposeful for the Caribbean people, and to tell our children a Caribbean story about their own existence. I feel equally that our culture and our cultural experience must now be indelibly imprinted in the minds and the psyches of our people. And quite frankly, what is a better expression of that cultural experience than this Carifestaxv 15 taking place here? And I say all of that within the context of civilization because this community of people in the Caribbean must at some soon stage learn to be able to speak with one voice. We are not exceptionally wealthy. We are not exceptionally powerful. But we do have numbers and we do have voice. And when that is all you have, you must use your voice even to the point where it shakes and sometimes it breaks. I am mindful that our society has been told by others who we have been taught to look up to that we are an inferiorized and an inferior people. And I want to begin by rejecting that notion, and I want to urge that that is part of what we must be doing as we map out the future that we want. I reject, for example, the proposition that I heard as a child that I live in anybody's backyard, or that we live as a community of countries and nations in anybody's backyard. I reject that, and I do not believe that we live in anybody's backyard any more than that anybody lives in our backyard. Talk to me about building neighborhood. Talk to me about shared values. Talk to me about shared principles and common concerns, common threats. Natural disasters which we must be able to collaborate together in order to protect our respective peoples together. But do not demean me by telling me that I am a boy in your backyard. And don't treat me like a boy in your backyard. Equally, I feel that we have to be mindful that as a community of nations, there are some things which are said that impact on the dignity of our people. And please forgive me if I use language that might not ordinarily be used in this type of environment, Mr. Moderator, but I simply use language that has been used internationally. I do not think that there is any dignity or decency to a view that any country in the Caribbean can be called a shithole country. But that is said, and these are things that go directly to the minds of our young people. These are things that go directly to the hearts of our young people. These are things that revisit a level of indignity of the human being that takes us back through centuries of colonial and racial experience. And those are things that we as a community of nations must begin to be able to collectively push back against. The second limb is the political limb. And if we're going to have a big talk and we're going to have a big conversation, then let me say that I think it is impossible for us not to come to terms with some realities. We as a set of microstates are finding it increasingly difficult to survive individually and alone. It is for that reason that CARICOM was created. Because as a community of nations, we were able then to collaborate and to share experiences and to share resources and to have economies of scale that allow for us to be able to better manage the interests of our people. But perhaps it is now time for us to realize that in the same way that we have been finally able to begin that elusive process that eluded us for about 50 years, or I think it probably is 53, 54 years, Ambassador, to have full free movement of our people. And we will, from the 1st of October, be at that point where 4 countries will finally begin that journey. Then let us also realize that perhaps it is necessary for us to be able to have a nation which is elected and represent, or has its government and governance elected and represented by its people as one nation. And I don't think that that is really beyond us in the Caribbean. And in the same way that other parts of the world have found a federal capacity, and yes, it has been an experiment that we tried and we failed at before, but it must not elude us forever because it is only through deepening the collective voice and the collective influence and the collective power of the people of this region that we will be able to survive and the global tide and the global winds of fundamental change that are taking place. I begin there. I also feel very strongly that as we move forward, we have to build that bridge that, again, Carifestaxv is teaching us that we have the capacity to build. For many, many years, it has been an elusive ambition that we reach out to brothers and sisters in Africa. Next week, this region is going to hold the first ever in-person meeting of heads of government and heads of state in CARICOM and in the African Union. That joint meeting will take place on the 7th of September in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. For the first time ever, heads of government of this region will meet in person with heads of African countries. And there are some things that we must be able to come away with in very short order. We have to be able to build an air bridge and a sea bridge so that there can be tourism between our two parts of the world, that there can be more meaningful commercial linkages between our two parts of the world. And frankly speaking, we cannot any longer continue to simply box ourselves into a comfortable corner and call ourselves warm weather getaways for the North Atlantic countries. We have to be able to build a tourism industry across this region that sees our people being employed 12 months a year, 365 days a year. Gone forever should soon be that time when you have hotels that close down for 2 months or 3 months simply because it is summertime and it is vacation time for the owners of the property, and the North Atlantic countries are not cold, so nobody is coming. This region in this week is seeing the African delegations here in large numbers. This region in this week is seeing here in Barbados Latin American delegations here in large numbers. This region in this week is seeing the CARICOM and the Caribbean communities delegations here in large numbers. And it tells me with 5,000 more people than usual in Barbados at the end of August, that there is an opportunity for us to be able, around the year, to be able to have the level of tourism product that keeps our tourism industry thriving and free of those types of very temporary interruptions. I do not know of any industry anywhere in the world which only operates for 9 months in any year, and it should not be so for us in the Caribbean. So if I begin there, Ambassador, then I think those would be the areas which I think most fundamentally touch me. And as you hinted very broadly before, there are other things that can be derivatives of that conversation. Because frankly speaking, we cannot, as a community of people, coexist and have that voice in common without also talking about the problems that impact us. And as Ambassador said, among those problems would be things like the need for us to have very serious discussion about reparations and reparatory justice, for us to have very serious discussions about the climate. I think those of you who were in and about, around and about Barbados today realize that this country was hotter than I can recall it being ever, certainly in my lifetime. And the fact of the matter is, this is now a lived reality. It has its consequences. Not being a little boy in anybody's backyard means that I must have conversations with neighbors as to how the climate impacts me, impacts countries next to me, and impacts those within the wider neighborhood. Because there are some threats that we have in common. We may not agree as to what is the cause of the change in climate, but what we can never disagree about is the fact that billions of dollars are being spent in order to make sure that we do the rehabilitation after the Category 5 storms sweep through this region year after year after year. And it is vitally important for us to be able to have mature discussion on these things, and I welcome that opportunity as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. You have made some very solid points. Worker, people-centered societies, of dignity and upward social mobility, Caribbean nations of sovereignty and dignity that must be respected. We are in nobody's backyard. And I must tell you, 2 years ago, I attended the Caribbean Agriculture Conference in the Bahamas. I was leading the Barbados delegation. And we were having an address from a representative of the US Department of Agriculture. He was making a speech. And he made the mistake of saying that the Caribbean was in somebody's backyard. Whereupon I interrupted the speech, brought the speech to a halt, and explained to the gentleman that the Caribbean was not in anybody's backyard. Perhaps we shared the same neighborhood. He dutifully apologized, changed his terminology from backyard to neighborhood, and the speech was allowed to continue. But those are the type of things that we have to do. We have to do those, we have to correct people. Anyhow, you also made the very strong point about deepening Caribbean integration, even to the stage of another shot at a federal structure. A bridge to Africa and all the opportunities that that will bring with it. We'll explore that next week. And the need to work together on the climate crisis. Very solid points. Audience members, you may want to engage ultimately with the minister on those points. Gloria, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this invitation. All of the time that I come to Barbados, I feel very happy. It's a big honor for me. Thank you for allowing me to do this. I agree with what the minister said, but I think that unity, collaboration, we need to get together. We need to share our problems. We need to fight together. We need to develop our countries. We need to save our culture, to teach the young generation the history. I am very happy to be here also because I see her, because she's listened what happened in our countries, the necessity to save the culture, the necessity to study our history, not the history of the people who colonized us, our history with our voices, with our music. The culture is very important, and the artists, we have an important role in the Caribbean society. It's not just a pleasure to make art, it's an art together with a commitment with our history, with our ancestors, with our African ancestors, because the majority of the people in the Caribbean, we are Black. And how many times we don't see only a stereotype or just for entertainment? So we need to be clear that our young generation had the power, had the knowledge. And sometimes they ask, well, we need a big technology to make a film, a big technology to make our piece of art. And sometimes, with few resources, you can make a history of your people, the voices of your family, the voices of your neighbor. Where can you find the nature, the possibility to do your work? It's in the voice of the people. Caribbean artists must be close to the people and talk to them. And this is a way to think. It's a way to think. It's a way to discover who we are. Also, it's very important that Caribbean countries get the notion of anti-imperialism. We need freedom. We need to be respected. We are not part, or we don't need to be part of the imperio. No. We are nations that we have the possibility to develop our history, our culture, our intellectuality, our music. You see how they start this celebration, because for me, this is a celebration. It's not just a panel, David. It's a celebration for all of us with music, because music put together everybody here. and we understand this international language, but especially when play the drums, because the drums for us means liberation. When the drums were playing in Haiti, they get the liberation of the people. And in the Caribbean countries, we need to establish the knowledge of Haiti. Haiti today have many problems, but sometimes I think that is the way to erase the glorious history that Haiti gave to the Caribbean, not only to the Caribbean, Latinos country and around the world. So I think that we need to remember Haiti all the time and help Haiti to continue, and that the people, especially the young generation, they will be able to know this glorious history. When they liberate, they finish the first country where they have that rebellion of enslaved people, and they were able to be free. So I think that I am not going to talk very much because I can speak in Spanish, but in English, for me, it's a big effort. But I think that honestly, we need to get together. The world of images, films is very powerful, and we need to get the showcase of Caribbean movies. We need to develop the showing of all these excellent films and documentaries that we made in the region in order to show what we have in common, the beauty of our images, the beauty of our history. So as a woman that lives in Cuba, and everybody knows that we have very special situation of blockade during many years, but at the same time, we are maroons. We are cimarroons, and all the Caribbean people must be cimarroon, maroons, to continue our life. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much, Gloria. And I think I see a pattern emerging here because Minister Simmons made 5 fundamental points, and you have made 5 fundamental points too. Your first point, the need for Caribbean unity and collaboration. Secondly, we must teach the history. We must root our people in our history. Number 3, the need for purposeful and committed art, and the need for much more of such art. We need to produce much more purposeful and committed art. 4th, the Caribbean, the same way we talk about the Caribbean being a zone of peace, the Caribbean must be a zone of anti-imperialism and self-determination. And number 5, the knowledge of Haiti as a source of cultural creativity and strength. Have I done justice in summarizing? Thank you. Okay, we go from Cuba to Helen of the West, the beautiful island of St. Lucia, and our brother, Dr. Adrian Auger. Dr. Auger, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. And in the spirit of not being in anybody's backyard, we are not the Helen of the West, because that is to equate us with a Eurocentric standard of existence, which we do not need. And I frankly would like to see us move away from. I have some notes. I'll try and get through them as quickly as possible. I start off with the premise that there are no accidental futures. The future is shaped by intent. The future is shaped by intent. Our future cannot be accidental, it cannot be anecdotal, it cannot be inconsequential, it cannot be any of those things. It cannot be incidental. It has to be shaped by intent.
If it is not shaped by our intent, then it will be shaped by someone else's intent. Nature abhors a vacuum, and somebody will paint on our canvas if we stand there looking at it and doing nothing. So, what is the future we envisage, and how do we intend to get us there? While holding on to our shared values, our dreams, our capacities, and holding them not just intact, but expanding them exponentially. We have to contemplate these questions, and in order to do that, we must understand the road that we are on. There is not a shared understanding of the road that we are on. The Caribbean is a continuity. It didn't happen yesterday. It didn't start last year. It didn't start in the 1500s even. And as I am fond of saying in some of my work, history did not start in the belly of no damn slave ship. Now, until we believe that, and we are prepared to go even further back to understand the derivatives of our identities, then we're avoiding fundamental questions. That understanding must come not just from nostalgia, sentimentality, and fading memory, but from cold, hard assessments of our economic and political trajectories. And Minister has touched on that. This is where the aspirational imagery must give way to some data about our current circumstances. Those circumstances must be measured not just in exports and conventional GDP and tourism arrivals, but in other indicators such as real wealth, ownership, equity of access, housing, health, education, justice, security, domestic investment, which is becoming something of a rare commodity because we are becoming increasingly dependent in many of our economies on foreign direct investment. As evidence of that, in many of our countries, our middle classes are disappearing. They are shrinking. That is a fundamental problem in our demographics. There are reasons for it. We need to look at that. On all these fronts, there are serious warning signs: disguised poverty, despite overt employment, increases in violent crime, evidence of social dislocation, serious outmigration with the accompanying brain drain, aging populations associated with the disappearing middle class, increasing dependency burdens associated with the concentration of poverty at the lower end of the demographic spectrum. Deterioration of housing stock is happening across our economies. That means the largest store of wealth of our populations, intergenerational wealth, is eroding. That is a bad sign. In some economies, creaking infrastructure, accompanied by expanding government. That's a problem. Why do governments have to take on a larger and larger burden of the development process? That's a problem. It means that the distribution of resources is not optimal. And government becoming bigger means that politics is becoming bigger. It means that the autonomy of your populations are becoming smaller. That is not healthy. So the shrinking domestic private sectors in some of our economies is a problem. That is accompanied by a contradiction of political discontinuity in many of our islands and policy vacillation from one administration to the next. So we're using resources to start something, and 5 years later we're stopping it, and these are luxuries we can ill afford. In fact, let me rephrase that. That's a stupidity we can ill afford. I would also like to suggest that we need to get over the falsehood of scarcity. That is a vestige of our British upbringing, that there is not enough to go around. That is not true. There is plenty money being made in the Caribbean, just not by us. Now, these realities, summarized very quickly, are propelling us in varying degrees towards unwanted destinations. And I tried to find a phrase that might encapsulate my own thinking both as poet and economist. And I just came up with 5 words. Us together at our best. And I'd like to leave that hanging in the air as something of a mantra, something of a philosophy, something of a buzz phrase, something of a resonance that we might carry with us. Us together at our best, global best, international best, conceptual best, efficient best. These are the challenges facing the region right now. So issues of imitation, issues of dependency begin to disappear because we are aiming at global best practice to be exemplars in these societies which are transformable precisely because they are small. You can train the entire population of St. Lucia in 3 years. I've done the math. Using existing infrastructure of schools that are closed more than they're open in any 24-hour cycle. We can do this. If we do not change now, and incidentally, I wrote a poem for Mayor Motley about 2 weeks before, not this election, but the one before, and I tell people that accounted for her victory. But it contained that sentiment that this is the time. The Caribbean has to move now. We are not going to have this opportunity again because the most precious things are escaping us. And among the most precious things that are escaping us is memory. There is a generation of young people who don't know who Sparrow is, who don't know who Lord Kitchener is, who don't know who Rosa Parks is, if we want to go there, who don't know who Toussaint is, who will soon not know who Fidel is, who do not know any of the artists that were mentioned by the moderator. And I am privileged, and many of us are privileged, to have met those persons in person. But they are passing from us. And when our memories go, that'll be another 100 years of our history lost, because they existed before the digital age. And at any rate, there is so much competition for eyeballs on screens that we are probably not going to be able to insert those memories back into the heads of an entire generation. But they can tell you what Beyonce had for breakfast. The notion of a collective Caribbean future must be important to us. I hope that it is, but sometimes I'm not entirely sure. What is this road that we must travel together? Maybe slower, but further. Are we prepared as regional governments, for example, Minister, to actually devolve power from our little fiefdoms to a central government? The model of the OECS, the model of the CARICOM community, is in many respects further advanced than other models of integration. Even when it started, it was ahead. Many of those have passed us now. And our model of integration has not advanced at the pace that it should. It is time to revisit that. I am going to start with one of my very fundamental recommendations, that Barbados should become part of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. Okay, Bajans, that caused a little trepidation, no problem. But while we have, and it's the existence of 1 or 2 progressive prime ministers that's going to make this happen. We have been apart too long. Ambassador June Suma spoke not so long ago at the beginning of this festival about artificial striations in the population of CARICOM. That is part of it. Barbados needs to join the OECS, or the OECS needs to join Barbados. Find a way. But there's too much stuff being learned and lost, and being learned and lost, and being learned and lost, when we can be best practice to each other. I think this festival teaches us that. So it is a waste of our scarce resources to try and get it done alone when we really need to leapfrog ahead of the competition, to move our region not through a series of similar mistakes, but actually to the next platform of best practice. I would like to make some specific recommendations because I'm conscious of time. A massive investment in education, I think, should be our number one priority in this region. A massive investment in building our people. And that includes education in the liberal arts, which is where the morals, the mores, the fundamentals of your society come from. So yes, introduction to business is wonderful, and accounting and technical drawing, but who's designing the damn thing? So, you know, these are the sorts of questions. We're not teaching design, we're not teaching innovation, but we're teaching the tools rather than the mindset, and we need to start teaching the mindset. Island histories do not exist in many of our countries. So we don't know enough about ourselves, much less about each other. Regional histories must be actively taught. It is now possible to go through secondary school and not meet Walcott. It is possible to go through and not meet Naipaul. It is possible to go through and not meet CLR James. It is possible to go through and not know who the Secretary General of CARICOM was and the founding of Carifestaxv. Many people don't know the history, and it's going to evaporate very quickly if we're not active about our intent. Innovation must become a way of thinking and doing, retaining our values as foundations, but always being driven forward by unbridled curiosity about everything. My greatest fear is that our young people coming out of school have been taught how to respond. They have not necessarily been taught how to think and question and dissent and disagree and debate and find other ways. So you tell me what I need to know, I tell it back to you. I get an A on the exam, I get the piece of paper, I go get a job, I become a cog in somebody else's capitalist wheel. What is our intent as societies? Regional institutions need to be properly funded. Carifestaxv needs to be properly funded, and Dr. Hilary Brown and myself discussed an alternative model to financing Carifestaxv. This wonderful thing that is giving rise to this wonderful conversation is unfunded except by the sacrificial host government who decides that it is politically and financially feasible to go through this pain one more time. There are other ways to finance this. Let's find it. CARICOM needs to be a living thing, plugged in on the ground and walking among the people, not sequestered in unassailable conferences and arcane meetings which do not tangibly change their lives for the better. There needs to be a biennial open thought forum on the future of the Caribbean. We should be getting together at least every 2 years. Many of us used to fly off to the Miami conference on the Caribbean in Miami because the malls are better there, you understand. We need to have an annual thought conference or a biennial thought conference on the future of the Caribbean, and it must be funded by the banks. Commercial banks, development banks, and central banks, because they should understand what the economics of integration looks like and what the priorities should be. And if you're looking for a rationale, a motto, a driver, I offer you again a phrase which I think can be aspirational, can be a slogan, can be a mantra. Us together at our best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Auger. Much of his contribution, a critique of Caribbean society as it exists now, the insistence that the future must be intentionally shaped, and putting a number of proposals on the table for the shaping of that future. A critique of many of the negative and even existential negative existential factors that are impacting our societies that, if not attended to, could prove fatal. One point that I would perhaps take some issue with is the call for a reduced role for the state. And I think we did go through a period back in the 70s, perhaps, when states might have been oversized. I'm not sure that that is the case now. I mean, I'll give you one practical example. The Barbadian state is right now catalyzing a high-tech component of our economy, a life sciences industry. If that were simply left to the private sector, I'm not sure it would happen. But anyhow, that's something we can perhaps get into further discussion. Barbados joining the OECS? Yes, I mean, that idea. I was Prime Minister Owen Arthur's representative on the Barbados OECS Unity Task Force. That task force had one meeting, and a certain leader from the OECS poured cold water over the entire exercise. That was the, that was the end of it. But it is a matter that needs to be revisited, and I can tell you that the Barbados government is not averse to revisiting it. But yes, so a very probing, challenging presentation with many concrete ideas that we need to grapple with, and all undergirded by the mantra, us together at our best. And audience members, I think Dr. OJ has put much on the table for you to engage with when we get into the question and answer session. But I want to go to our youth representative, our student representative. She hails from the land of my birth, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and incidentally, one of the 4 countries that will be coming together in a very close and special relationship come the 1st of October, Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Belize, and Dominica. And we hope and trust that once we establish that model of free movement, freedom to move, to work, to live, that in the succeeding months and years, the other CARICOM member states will join us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to give a listening ear to Zaida Davis. Not working?
Good evening, everyone. Forgive me if I sound like a broken record because I share a lot of the ideas that my fellow panelists share, and I'm going to touch on them also, and permit me to reference my notes. I think from the perspective of youth, the fact that I can sit here this evening in front of all of you means that we're taking steps in the right direction. To be able to be afforded these opportunities where youth voices are represented and I can speak on behalf of not only myself but the youth of the region means that we are in the right direction, and there are different things I want to touch on today. I first want to say there's a saying, the past is in the past. I do not agree with that statement. As a region, we have a shared history despite our unique island identities. And in order to preserve our history, we must first understand the past, appreciate the past, and make the necessary requirements to ensure that the teachings of the past and the messages of the past are not only available for the learning in the present, but carried on for future generations. We as a region, we share a unique fusion that finds our carnivals, our culinary traditions, our musical innovations like reggae, calypso, soca, our oral storytelling practices, as well as our cultural heritage from indigenous traditions, African resilience, European influences, and Asian migrants. However, this rich heritage faces significant threats through global media, and we must take the initiative to We must take the initiative and combat the inadequate institutional support for cultural transmission. This is where I call for the decolonization of cultural narratives. We must intentionally create platforms for intergenerational dialogue. We must have indigenous learning in our schools. We need to teach the Garifuna language in classes. We need to share the history of our region. As a student at UWI, it's really surprising and baffling and shocking to me when I speak to my peers from across the region and we don't know much about the island's history. We don't know much about each other. And we're supposed to be one CARICOM, one region, but yet, why is it that we know nothing about each other? There needs to be a call for education and regional history in our classes. We can tell you that we were colonized through this period, and this is when the British had us colonized, this is when the French had us colonized. But why are we not talking about our regional leaders, our regional advocates in our classes? Additionally, I'd like to touch on the topic of sport and art and the need for funding and supporting our creatives in the region. I think it's fitting here that we are at Carifestaxv stage for our creatives and arts to display. However, I think that after Carifesta, when the lights are off and everyone goes back to their respective islands, what is being done in those islands to ensure that our creatives are being funded and supported? We need to ensure that there is a space for student artists and young people to be able to express themselves creatively. We need to also touch on our athletes. A lot of our athletes, I think most of our athletes, especially in their prime, they fit into the category of youth, 18 to 35. But however, a lot of the athletes speak out about being underfunded or the need for support, or they often feel the need to leave the region to get the necessary financial support that they need. I think as ambassadors for the region, and they support us in everything that we do, I think it's important for us also to now invest in these athletes. I think we're making strides in the right direction with UWI and the Faculty of Sport. It is a fairly new faculty, however, they are making strides in the right direction. I like to reference my notes a bit here, but there is the UWI Sport for Development Initiative, and it's supported by the Caribbean Development Bank, and it represents a multidimensional approach that allows students and the sustainable development of Caribbean societies. However, there needs to be a greater investment into our athletes. I'd also like to talk about inclusive education, transforming systems for equity and access. Educational inclusivity represents a critical frontier for youth development in the region. And oftentimes, traditional systems have failed to address the diverse need of learners. The region faces significant challenges, especially pertaining to students living with disabilities or learning issues. We need to make the classrooms inclusive, and it is not only a moral responsibility, but an economic imperative. I would also like to touch on the need to address and adapt as a region. We need to invest more in learning of AI and analytics and the digital transformation that is going on in the world. We are making strides in those areas. I know UWI recently implemented a environmental sustainability minor. However, we also need to create scholarships and funding opportunities for persons to not only be able to access these available resources, but we need to look at our syllabuses, we need to look at our majors, our current programs, and to see where it is that we can adapt, where it is that we can add to ensure that our students and our youth are not only knowledgeable in the areas, but actually have the skill and the opportunities to go forward and access these opportunities. I'd also like to touch on regional unity in global uncertainty. I think if anything, my fellow panelists and I, we all share the sentiment that we are one region. We are one CARICOM. And I think we as CARICOM and the Caribbean region, we should not pick and choose when it's convenient to be a CARICOM member or when it's convenient to be a Caribbean state. In times of uncertainty with our hurricanes and in a post-pandemic world, we were all able to band together and come together and get the resources we need. However, when we have different islands and different member states pandering to the colonial forces in a sense. That doesn't work for us. It doesn't align with the goals of a unified CARICOM. Going forward, we need to speak as one CARICOM. There's a need for our leaders to echo one message, one voice, one region. We cannot be a unified front if we are all sharing different opinions, or if we all have different perspectives. We must come together as one region and one CARICOM. As I close, I want to continue to advocate for the inclusion of youth in these political spaces. I think we as a generation, we have such a unique power that we're sometimes unaware of. Youth voices and youth coming together, it really does have the possibility to make an impact. And I think it's important that we continue to encourage our youth to step up and step forward and be advocates in these spaces. I also think my generation, we have the power of social media. And sometimes we do not appreciate the things that we can do with social media in a positive aspect. And I think it panders back to Minister Simmons when he said we're not in anybody's backyard. A lot of the times, the content that is being put out on social media with regards to the Caribbean, especially from my youth and the generation, is I live where you vacation, or where, but we are not where I live where you vacation. I live where there is a rich heritage and history. I live where there are advocates and ambassadors. I live where there are talented athletes. I live where there are talented creatives. That is the message that we should be putting out on social media. I think we can also utilize social media to showcase our rich traditions and histories. We have the platform there. There's not only a need for physical record keeping as well, but we can use our social media platforms as a way of digital record keeping and digital archives. And I think it's important that my generation and the older generation as well, I think it's important that everybody knows how to use social media. We must use these resources to our advantage. I think we as youth are in a very critical position where we have the ability to make an impact. And there are youths out there making impacts and raising their voices, but we call on our leaders now on a regional scale to listen to us. Not only to listen to us, but action as well. We can all sit here and discuss the ways we think the Caribbean needs to go forward. We as leaders can come in these meetings and discuss policies that need to be implemented or changes that need to be implemented. But at the end of the day, talk is talk. We must take the talk and we must turn it into action. I thank you.
Okay. Well said, Zaida. Very well said. You running through your discourse, the need for intergenerational dialogue and the need for inclusion of youth in political spaces and embracing all that the youth can bring. Also, a very important point that you made, and you insist upon it, and it coheres with positions taken by both Adrian and Gloria, the need to know our history, intentional teaching of history and knowledge of each other. Adrian spoke about the long view of history, the long view that goes way back beyond the enslavement and the Middle Passage. I like your point about more support for creatives and athletes. Strong point. We just have to look at when Jamaica made that investment in keeping their athletes at home, developing their own high-performance academies, MVP with Stephen Francis and Don Mills, who went on to coach Usain Bolt. Look at what happened. Usain Bolt, Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, all dominating world athletics for more than a decade, It just shows what is possible when we believe in ourselves and back ourselves and support our own educational reform, catering to multiple intelligences, and your insistence on regional unity and a common foreign policy. Very well said. Okay, so we go now to our final panelists, Kimberly Agard, who represents the voice and perspective of the labor movement. Kimberly?
Hi, good evening. It's truly an honor to be here this evening in this big conversation. I almost thought that Minister Simmons was peeping at my notes when he started to speak about labor and the workers but I'm glad that someone in his position would have that outlook and perspective about workers and labor. Funny enough, labor and workers tend to be, I know we're not speaking about being in the backyard, but sometimes labor can be seen as the ugly stepchild. And therefore, in some instances, we are not taken seriously. But I am hoping that in the near future, without any serious uprising, but if it has to happen, it will. But without that labor can have a proper and decent, loud and visible seat at tables all across the region. I will give an intro and then I will go into some points that I have listed. When we speak about the future that we want, I believe that we must begin by acknowledging the people who carry this region on their shoulders every single day, and that is our workers. From the teachers shaping young minds, to the nurses keeping families alive, to the sanitation workers ensuring the health of our communities, to the countless public servants who keep our states functioning. And we definitely saw the role and importance of the public servants, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. Labor is not just a factor of production. Labor is the heartbeat of our societies, and so the future we design must be a future that protects and empowers workers. As trade unionists, we know the world of work is changing rapidly. Technology, artificial intelligence, climate change, and economic shocks are reshaping the labor landscape. Our workers must not be left behind. We need continuous training, reskilling, and deliberate investment in a future-proof workforce. And trade unions must have a seat at the table in shaping these policies. We don't want to be told, we want to be included in the discussions and in the deliberations before the decision is made. Correct. At the same time, this conversation is about Caribbean unity. Just as our governments seek to deepen regional integration, our trade unions must also build stronger bridges. Workers across the Caribbean face similar struggles, whether it's low wages, job insecurity, or the vulnerabilities created by climate change. We must stand in solidarity, ensuring fair treatment for all workers, including migrant workers from Haiti and across the region whose dignities and rights must be protected. For me, trade unions are not only about wages and working conditions. We are also guardians of democracy and social justice. That means speaking up about poverty, inequality, gender equity, healthcare, and youth opportunities, because a just society for our workers is a stronger, more resilient Caribbean. And I must add, the labor movement must speak to young people in a new and relevant way. If we want this movement to endure, we have to modernize, embrace innovation, and create spaces for our youth voices. The future belongs to them, but they will only claim it if they feel represented and respected. And this is something that unions, not only locally, regionally, but also internationally, we recognize that there is a void with youth participation within the trade union movement, and may not be bringing the results as rapidly as we would want, but I know there is a conscientious effort to get youth involvement within the trade union movement. Similarly to what you said before, letting and educating the young people about the past and the struggles that the forefathers would have made for them to enjoy the workforce that they do enjoy now. Finally, I want to emphasize this. Workers are not obstacle to progress. They are the foundation of progress. The Caribbean future we want must be one where workers are respected, protected, and empowered. Because without labor, there is no sustainable development, no regional unity, and no democracy. Some of the points I want to get over the number one is the worker at the center of development. We must emphasize that true Caribbean development cannot happen without placing the worker at the heart of policies. Labor is not just a factor of production, but the backbone of our societies. As I said before, the teachers, the nurses, the sanitation workers, all workers must be deemed and seen important. Any future we map must guarantee dignity of work, fair wages, and decent working conditions. The evolving world of work with the global shifts, the climate change, the digitization, the AI, the precarious work, they are all reshaping our labor markets. Caribbean workers risk being left behind if not equipped with continuous training, reskilling, and technological adaptation. Trade unions must advocate for a future-proof workforce. The climate change definitely resounds with me. I know the minister spoke about it in terms of the impacts of climate change, and we are all feeling the heat. But I would have visited Dominica one day after Hurricane Maria. And what I saw there, I would say in terms of the state of that country, the persons that I know there, even the trade union leaders, and to see how vulnerable they were, I will admit it was very life-changing to see the impacts and how easily you could have a good and comfortable life. When I came back to Barbados, I went to Dominica on the Rudyard Lewis with the Coast Guard, and I only broke down when my feet hit home ground again because I remembered what I left. For a while, I did not wear jewelry. For a while, I did not wear makeup because I recognized those things in the split of a second can mean nothing. I would have left friends there with money in the bank, but unable to access that money to help themselves. So the climate change and the impacts of it definitely being touted about, especially by our Prime Minister, who seems to be the champion of that cause, definitely needs to be prioritized. 3, Caribbean unity and worker solidarity. Just as governments are talking about deeper regional integration, labor movements must also unite. Highlight how Caribbean trade unions can pool strategies on migrant labor rights, especially Haitian and regional workers, collective bargaining frameworks that protect across borders, standing together against external exploitation and unfair globalization practices. And I think somebody would have mentioned it as well, where we need to regularize our standards across the borders, whereas what obtains in Barbados should obtain in Trinidad, and especially in those those islands who are part of the free movement of labor, where then those persons won't be discriminated and treated as equally when they go to seek a better life. The social justice role of trade unions. Trade unions are not just for wages, they are guardians of democracy and social justice. We have a responsibility to speak on poverty, inequality, gender equity, healthcare access, and youth opportunities. A just society for workers equals a stronger democracy and a more resilient region. Number 5, youth and the future of labor. Many young people don't see unions as relevant. We need to stress the need to modernize and engage youth in trade union activism, where we talk about providing a perfect link to talk about building a labor movement that reflects the workers and their aspirations, also hearing what the young worker needs in these times, as opposed to trying to put onto those persons entering the workforce what we would have experienced before. I spoke briefly about the climate change and the migration and worker resilience. Caribbean workers are already on the front line of climate disasters. Hurricanes destroy jobs, housing, schools, healthcare systems. And again, I think our Prime Minister always says that an economy can be decimated within a half an hour of a serious disaster hitting any country, despite how you may feel or how secure you may feel, but just in the wink of an eye, that can be all gone. Migration must be approached in solidarity, not discrimination, ensuring that migrant workers have rights. The role of trade unions in policy and governance. Trade unions must be partners in shaping the Caribbean future and not afterthoughts. Labor should have a permanent seat in national and regional decision making. I speak about bodies as the same CPSA, the Caribbean Public Services Association, and also the Caribbean Congress of Labor being included in these heads of government regional meetings. I think the CCL already has a seat in the CARICOM meeting. Push for stronger social partnership models regionally. And we know that the social partnership model within Barbados, that is one that is envied across the region based on the setup with labor, capital, and government, where then everyone who sits at the table has an equal voice and equal opportunity at times to lend to the decision or policies that are being made. We would love to see that implemented more across the region. Also, quite a bit of the ILO conventions that are being ratified, they're not adopted by a lot of the Caribbean islands. Currently, the C-190 legislation, which speaks to workplace violence and harassment in the workplace, is only ratified by 3 Caribbean countries. And so how can you be speaking seriously about the protection of workers and the importance of workers, but you do not embrace or adopt a policy like that that speaks to the protection of workers? If you say that you recognize the importance of workers, there should be no hesitation. The 3 countries who have adopted that ILO convention, those 3 countries are Barbados, Antigua, and the Bahamas. Where are the others? Don't they recognize the importance of their workers? Don't they recognize the protection of their workers as well? So there needs to be serious conversation and push by the trade union leaders to also to make that. We're persons that if we want to also speak about, because I'm wrapping up now, when we want to speak about the migration, I will give an example where I would have attended a regional meeting in March. And it just so happened that I met a few of the other attendees in the airport. And the way and questioning when you were attending a conference in a Caribbean country, and we're all Caribbean persons entering the country, and the way that I was treated with my Barbados passport compared to how my colleagues were treated with their passports, we had to make it an issue of conversation at the meeting, because I was allowed to pass easily through immigration and customs with my Barbados passport. But I won't call the country that we visited, nor will I call the other countries who would have had a harder time to pass through customs. But then we're speaking about what we're saying, easy movement of labor and that type of stuff. But we can't be having those things if those are the obstacles that we are still having for our persons to easily traverse through the Caribbean. Labor is an area that I definitely can speak about, and the issues I can speak about forever, but I also know that we are constrained for time and we want to get some input and questions as well from the audience. So again, I say thank you, and that is my contribution on behalf of Labour.
Thank you, Kimberly. You touched on many points, some of which were you were making challenges to our governments and our societies, but you made a number of points that really point right back at the trade union movement. The need to build bridges between trade unions across the Caribbean. That's a matter for the trade union movement. Trade unions can't only focus on matters of wages, etc., but wider social issues and social justice issues. That's a lesson that the trade unions have to actualize. Trade union movement must make effort to reach our youth. The Caribbean Congress of Labor, it is an associate member of CARICOM, but it perhaps needs to bestir itself and be more intentional and purposeful in how it engages in those CARICOM structures. And push for the Barbados Social Partnership model perhaps as a best practice to push to have it adopted across the region. So I like the fact that you are actually challenging the trade union movement too, as we go forward, you know, to do some things in a very proactive way. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, you have heard the panel. As I indicated, we want this to be interactive. There's a lot of food for thought came out of these 5 presentations. Feel free to pose questions, but also feel free to make your own critique of Caribbean society. Feel free to put on the table issues. I want Mary Ann Redmond, who is the president of the Barbados Secondary Teachers Union in Barbados. She has indicated that she would like to make a presentation right after Kimberly to support some of the points that her trade union colleague would have made. So could we give the microphone to Ms. Redmond first, and then we come to the other speaker. She just wanted to emphasize to bring additional trade union power to this discourse. Could you help her with the microphone? Make sure it's on.
Thank you, Chair. Just to perhaps in a more practical way underscore a lot of what has already been said by Kimberly and the trade union movement to put into practice us together at our best. Perhaps we have to look at issues of vision and collective agency. We know that trade unions have long been the voices of resistance and reform from the 1930s to the independence movements. And today, unions must help mobilize public support for people-centered vision of development, ensuring that workers are not just beneficiaries, but co-creators of national policy towards shaping our future in the Caribbean. As we look at youth empowerment and education, something close to my heart, we have to advocate for transformation of our education system. That is something that was already mentioned. Our education systems in the region must cater to individual needs of our students in the region. It must be inclusive education. It must address different intelligences. There must be critical thinking and innovation as fundamental to how we plan and implement education. It must, our transformed systems must emphasize vocational training, apprenticeships, sports, and culture, as was mentioned, all geared towards the identified needs within our society and economy. Youth inclusion in labor negotiations as we plan forward and move forward as a progressive labor movement in the region. By partnering with educational institutions, teacher unions can help design and ensure curricula that prepare young people for decent work and civic engagement, especially in emerging sectors like the green economy and digital services, towards resilience, sustainability, and qualitative development in the region. In terms of economic transformation, labor organizations must not only continue to push for fair wages, job security, and inclusive growth, but it must also prioritize local entrepreneurship and cooperative models. It must push, must push from low value exports to high value added exports driven by local talent. They must encourage entrepreneurship and regional collaboration. Attention to be paid to the informal economy because that is where so many of our young people will be able to gain their economic existence. They must support worker-owned enterprises and lobby for regional investment in creative industries, ensuring that economic transformation benefits all, not just the elite. Environmental stability, we have heard about the threat of global warming and climate change. Unions must be key players that ensure that workers are protected as economies shift to greener models, and that is something that must happen. There must be that shift to greener models, and in that shift, workers must be protected. Unions must negotiate for retraining programs, green job guarantees, and protections for vulnerable communities affected by climate change. In terms of governance and social justice, trade unions have historically fought for labor laws, voting rights, and social protections. Today, however, and in the future, they must continue to push for transparent governance, anti-discrimination policies, and very importantly, legal harmonization across CARICOM. There must be the push to encourage more of our CARICOM sisters to become members of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Unions' watchdog role is vital in holding governments accountable and ensuring that labor rights are not eroded by globalization or austerity. Battles fought and won on behalf of labor only remain won through vigilance and policing. Technology and innovation, a threat to Caribbean workers. As automation and AI reshape the workplace, unions can advocate for digital literacy programs. They must do so. Fair technological adoption and worker protections in the gig economy. Unions can also help shape policies around remote work, data privacy, and equitable access to digital infrastructure. In terms of cultural identity and diaspora engagement, unions must support cultural workers, many of whom operate in informal or precarious conditions, by negotiating fair contracts and benefits. Unions can also engage in diaspora labor organizations to build transactional solidarity, share best practices, and attract investment in regional development. The recent ILO conference on the new social contract in Barbados emphasized the need for tripartite cooperation, governments, employers, and unions working together to build inclusive, sustainable economies. That is the kind of future we must fight
Thank
for.
you, thank you, Mary. And for the benefit of the audience, the non-Barbadian audience, Marianne Redmond is a veteran Barbadian trade unionist who has been in the trenches for a very long time. But I recognize the lady in the
Crochet.
Yes, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. I'm enjoying this talk. And my name is Sheena Rose.
Sheena, okay. Okay.
I'm a visual artist from Barbados, and I am tremendously enjoying Carifestaxv. To be honest, I burn out. I trying to chase everything, and I enjoying it, and I even shaved my head 2 days ago because I embracing it that much spiritually. Now, on a serious note, I have shown globally, from the small island and all about the place. But I not come here to show off. I come here to ask questions and take advantage of this time. Now, I was invited to a Grenadier dinner in Barbados, and I was a lucky person to win a ticket with Virgin Airlines and Grenada Tourism Authority, and the list go on, and a hotel for 5 days. But what I did, I decided to take my 5 days, my vacation, and create a workshop for free. I went to the Grenada Tourism Authority. I spoke to them and I said, can we do a workshop for free, even for 1 day? I could go to the beach, whatever, but it's crucial and it's important that they need to understand how to operate in the visual arts or even in the arts of understanding their process, understanding business, understanding finances, understanding failure, and the list go on. I've been there and still there. So I went to Grenada and they were very hungry. A lot of people come, they talk, they express, they draw. We didn't draw. My main concern was them to understand it's a business, but also self-care. Now I come back to Barbados and I notice ever since that Jamaica, Cuba, Barbados, Trinidad, and maybe a few others have an advantage in the visual arts, in the film, in music, and others. But there are some other Caribbean countries and islands that don't have this amount of education or access. How can we get more workshops? How can we get cheaper flights? How can we get access to ourselves rather than I being generous and take my vacation time to help my fellow people? Help me with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. And again, for persons who may not be aware, but Sheena is a very acclaimed, internationally recognized and internationally in-demand artist. And so she makes a very good point. Can we develop a system in the Caribbean community, in the Caribbean, not just the Caribbean community, where we share our strengths with each other? Where one territory has a strength, we share it. We share our strengths. I mean, Cuba has practiced that for decades now. Cuba is always sharing its strengths with, not just Caribbean countries, but people all over the world. But I don't know if anyone wants to engage with that, because Sheena makes a very good point.
David?
And let's hear Gloria, Sheena.
I think that the collaboration in the field of art is very important. And in the case of Cuba, we share our experience in music, in dance, in the history, in the medicine, but especially in the world of art. It's very important. It's very important because we have many things in common. And the people immediately, they get in touch with the Cuban culture and they can understand much better our region. It's very interesting. So you need to go to Cuba and explore the experience that we have. We are not a rich country. We have many economic problems, but we save our culture because to save the culture is to save our independence. So, and each country, they have to save their independence also through the culture. So I think that is important. It's the music, it's the painter, it's the design, it's everything that is possible, and especially the oral tradition. The oral tradition is very important. So you are right, and I think that your desire to see much more about this is very important. But the fundamental thing is the unity between the Caribbean countries and to share what we have, everybody, because I am sure that everybody can give you some elements, especially in the country. So welcome to Cuba.
If I
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being so gracious. We cannot share what we don't know. And Chanel, you might go to Grenada with the presumption, and I'm not being critical, I'm just painting a scenario, with the presumption that you have more information than them and they need you, but we need each other. And it is not that I know more and you know less, but it might be that we're on parallel tracks, not destined to meet. And so whether it is up, down, or side to side, we need to share and know each other so that we can collaborate. And you might be making a mistake, I might be making a mistake, you might have a best practice, I might have a best practice, and we never know from each other. So coming out of Carifesta, for example, why is there not a catalog of the best of the Caribbean? Presumably that's what Carifesta is about. We should have a catalog. Everybody here is registered in one way or the other. We should be able to say these are the 10 best painters, the 10 best writers, the 10 best fashion designers, the new upcoming emergent talents in dance, in literature, in music, and whatever. And we should be able to get that as an annual output updated from Carifesta. Why can't we get that, a data bank? Why can't we get that? It's a place to start. It's practical, it's doable, the information exists.
And I agree with Adrian. When he began his intervention at the very start, he made a very important point. If there's one thing that we leave here collectively holding in our minds, I think it is that point. And it is that our future is not going to happen coincidentally. It is something that we must map out. There has to be an element of determination about those things which are futuristic. In my judgment, the question that you raised, Sheena, is a very important one. I think that it is important because it sheds a light on the way in which the governments of this region can find another way of collaborating. I mean, the truth is that in public health concerns, we find it possible to collaborate. In educational matters, we find it possible to collaborate. In sporting matters, we have found it possible to collaborate. Sometimes not as effectively as we would like, but we find it possible. That must be so for the arts as well. And I think that it is important for our ministries with responsible for arts promotion and arts development to be seen to be doing more of that type of collaboration. I think Carifesta is that golden opportunity, and I agree entirely with Adrian. We should be able to come away now with almost a checklist, if you will, of those people, yes, of resources that we can draw on. But even in the absence of that, it is important for our ministries to be able now to be that bridge into other countries so that if there is a curiosity about whatever, it might be a visual arts issue, it might be fashion, it might be dance, whatever. How does Barbados do it? Then you're able to reach out to the ministry in Barbados. In our case, to the National Cultural Foundation or whoever the technical people are that can give you that assistance, and very often of the technical kind, to be able to enable that kind of collaborative approach to our collective development. I also feel, and I'm being very candid with this community now because we're having a big conversation and we have to have bold moves. Let us be frank. Our private sector is a little bit too reticent in these matters. This Carifesta is sponsored, yes, but as I look at the list of sponsors, I'm not seeing a lot of the traditional private sector of the Caribbean. And it is important for the private sector of the Caribbean to be found where the people of the Caribbean are, and to be helping to be that vehicle that pulls us closer together. And I genuinely feel that this is an area where you're seeing governments largely being the state entrepreneur, reaching out and going where the private sector is perhaps reluctant to go, or unwilling to go, and trying to build arts and the creative side of our region's persona so as to build out a new dimension of this region. But this is really about building the region's economy as well. If you see what is happening around this island, culinary arts are on show, and that will ultimately lead to resources in the pockets of those people who are the chefs, etc. The visual arts are on show, and that will ultimately lead to other similar opportunities. I went to Mansa Musa 2 or 3 nights ago. I must confess that stage management, lighting, choreography, all of those are now going to be subsectors which are part of the legacy benefits to be felt in the cultural sector in this island. And frankly, it will be new business for people who go into that area. We have to have a private sector that sees this as a financial lifeline and an area of financial development and investment. That is the only way in which this region will stop being treated as though they are inferior or insignificant to a very similar type of cultural experience which is found in Los Angeles, California, in our neighbor to the north. And that didn't happen by accident. That was deliberately designed and developed, and we have to be prepared to recognize that there are good examples that we can follow and similarly make similar type of investments in our own future and economic development.
Kumfra.
Thank you. Blessings, family. Blessings to all gathered. We give thanks for the vision of Carifesta, and we give thanks for the vision of big conversations. And I say that because it is important that we retake, redirect our culture to serve our purpose. Because too often, our culture is engaged by those who want to monetize, and at the end of the day, they use the culture to our disadvantage. And Carifesta brings that understanding of responsibility. So we give thanks to those big conversations and to the whole ideal and the philosophy of Carifesta. Because you cannot have a national culture regardless of which island it is. And people, the main theme is about rum and women grinding the behinds. When an invasion is being staged in our own region, where is our center of our humanity and our sovereignty? My brother, Kerry, if my foot wasn't giving me trouble, I was going to walk across there and give you a big hug. Blessings. And we need to hear. I am not making a critique of the Mia Amor Motley's government, but we need to hear that kind of intelligence from her ministers on a more regular basis. I have known and I've seen and I've heard, but tonight you are almost of a different caliber of leadership. And we, the people, need and welcome. So we give thanks. Kwame Nkrumah, at the independence of Ghana, He said the independence of Ghana will be meaningless unless the whole of Africa, hello, is liberated. We are no longer buried in colonial constructs. We are pushing and releasing and emancipating yourself. But we need to think the same way in the Caribbean region. Who is Barbados, little Barbados, or little St. Lucia? And the constructs that we have to craft cannot be based upon capitalism. Amy says, yeah, wretched are the earth. Why should we look to the rot of Europe and build our civilizations on those principles? Good God. They enslaved us. They raped us. They transported us. They colonized us. And now you think that same system will give us our salvation? Where do we as a Caribbean people need to go in regards to labor, in regards to youth, in regards to creativity, in regards to mapping and determining our sovereignty? Thank you, family.
Thank you, my brother. Very solid statement there.
Could I intervene a little bit on the issue of the private sector?
Yeah, sure. Yes, just wanting to know, do we have other hands? Do we have other people willing to wanting to contribute? Okay. Yeah, Adrian, go ahead.
Very quick. The private sector will go where it sees benefits. And part of the responsibility of the organizers of such things is to make the benefits clear. There are 2 points I'd like to make on that. One, there were times when I could raise $120,000 in St. Lucia by making 5 phone calls to 5 prominent St. Lucian family-owned businesses. 5 calls, $20,000 each. Okay, Adrian, go ahead, we're with you. All of those companies have disappeared because our domestic private sector is shrinking. And that's the point I made earlier. The corollary of that is that culture has, in some cases, become a government thing. And we need to reverse that a little bit. Our departments of culture are not all as enlightened as they should be. And Carifesta, therefore, is not necessarily a showcase of our best. It is not necessarily us at our best. And so the private sector, I believe, and I am firmly rooted in the private sector, despite my broader conscience. And the domestic private sector has been excluded from some of the decision-making, some of the selection, et cetera, et cetera. It's become a government thing. And it's not a government thing that is based necessarily on presenting the best of us. It is very often a small, interconnected, I will use the word incestuous, community that keeps going over and over and over to the same festivals and offer the same opportunities. In all of our islands, I think that we need national literary festivals, we need national dance festivals, we need national theater festivals, national film festivals, and those at the domestic level then become the filters, the objective filters of what is best, what works, what encourages excellence. And I think it is at that level that the domestic private sector will first get involved and then extrapolate to the regional level if they see benefits, if they see excellence, if they see the type of quality that they wish to be associated with. That is not to take anything away from the minister's statement that there are many companies who could be doing more. And in some jurisdictions they do, and I could name a few who are very visibly behind Carnival in one country, for example, and completely silent in another, as if there is no parallel between the social benefits in one jurisdiction, one market, as opposed to the other. So it's a...
We're going to go to Matthew, but let me just mention one thing very quickly, because we could, as you say, we could pick sense out of it. After Barbados took down the statue of Admiral Nelson, which stood for 200 years in the middle of Bridgetown, outside the Parliament building. We took him down. We took it down in 2020. And what did we do? We then announced a national competition. We announced a competition for all of the citizens of Barbados to send in proposals as to what monument, design the monument, send it in, what monument should replace the Nelson statue. And the monument you see now, that national, what we call the National Family Monument, a beautiful monument, symbolizing the black family coming back, the family coming back together, the national heroes, etc. That was a winning entry from two Barbadians. I'm just making the point, I'm just kind of reinforcing your point that sometimes we need to open up. We need to open up these processes to the entire nation and to open competition, you know? But something for us to think about, because that particular project worked out beautifully for Barbados. It was so democratic and it produced excellence. Matthew.
Thank you very much. My name is Matthew Wilson. I'm the Barbados ambassador to the WTO and the UN in Switzerland. And I really, really love this panel because you guys are speaking truth, facts, but it's all coming from the heart. Every single one of you, I have heard, I have felt that you really feel and mean what you're saying. So I really applaud you for that. Now, here at Carifesta, this is probably my first Carifesta this may be my first Carifesta. And something has changed in me in just this week I've been here. I swear I've been walking a little bit taller, with a little bit more confidence. True, I'm also melting, but I'm still walking with greater confidence because I feel something happening, you know? I feel such pride walking amongst the Grand Market and going to the concerts and going to all the different events and really feeling this sense of regional pride and this sense of community between the Caribbean and Africa and the Caribbean and Latin America that frankly I have not felt for a very, very long time. And I've been doing this work for almost 25 years. So I really feel something is changing. I'd love the comments about education. I have to tell you that that there was a switch in my mind when I had a particular teacher at Barbados Community College, and that was Trevor Marshall, who is no longer with us. But he was fantastic. He changed how I looked at history and how I looked at the importance of history in charting your future, which is exactly what we're talking here today. So for me, this is not just about the future we want. This is frankly about the future I think that we deserve, really. So I have one question, really, and it's weird for me to ask a question to my big boss, who is Minister Simmons, of course. But for all of you, with what's happening globally nowadays, we see what's happening with the geopolitics. We see what's happening with lack of development assistance. We see what's happening with more conflict. We see about the attacks on gender equality and diversity and inclusion, and the push to make people that look like me and look like all of you and look like many of us in this room act smaller and be smaller. How can we in the Caribbean navigate these realities? Because we cannot demarcate ourselves from them because we are some of the most open economies in the world. And everything that happens out there affects us in here. So what are the one or two policies that you think we need to do as a region to be able to navigate and ride this really, really terrible wave that's happening right now? But thank you very much for this wonderful, big conversation.
Matthew, I will answer the question by way of a couple of analogies. Within the last few months, I believe I could go back probably until February or so, but I want to be more specific and more granular. So let me just say within the last few weeks, last couple of weeks, there have been a few examples of the reason why I have come around to the view that it is I almost said luxury, but I begin to agree more and more with Adrian the more I listen to him. It perhaps is a nonsense that we cannot afford for us to perpetuate this belief that little islands of 100 or a couple hundred square miles are going to by themselves be able to find the resilience and the self-sustainability that we perhaps believed we could do in the year 1960, 1966, 1970, 1975, and around those couple decades. I think that the world has changed. I am not convinced that it is going to change back to how it was. So this is not a question of an individual in a particular office. This is really about mood. A lot of the perception that unfortunately we lay at Washington's doorstep may be being a little bit unfair to Washington, because the fact of the matter is that if you go to London, the outlook is not fundamentally different. And if you go to France, or if you go to Germany, or if you go across continental Europe, or even into Canada, the truth of the matter is the issues remain very similar, and perhaps the degree of difference is more in kind rather than quality. So that, what then are we speaking about specifically? A couple of weeks ago, some of our sister CARICOM states would have been notified that, look, you guys went to the International Maritime Organization and you took a position in April which says that, you know, you want to see a cess being placed on ships which are more than 5,000 tons. And those ships, you want to have a cess as a way of inducing them and their owners to be able to change the technology so that they would be more environmentally friendly as they go about their business across the world. And so this is a way of bringing the shipping industry to the table to pay a little bit of money towards the larger global ambition that we believe as a region should exist. We believe that there should be some tangible collective effort to help us finance building resilience, building sustainability in this battle against the climate. That seemed to be a reasonable proposition, but then we were told by others that, you know, it's not so reasonable, and that you are really pandering to China, who has an advanced technology and they have a monopoly on some of the inputs at this point, and that the solution is not modernizing our industry, but rather the solution is change your perspective or else. We don't conduct these discussions with a megaphone shouting across the Atlantic. So therefore, perhaps people don't know that these things happen. And that in itself may be a problem. But the truth of the matter is that that is one of the things that says to me, you know, maybe we need to have stronger voice in order to have greater influence. Because what we are trying to do is in our interests. And what we are trying to do, as you just heard Kimberly say, her reality and her experience about visiting Dominica is the identical experience that I had when I visited Grenada as a young minister immediately after the hurricane that struck them and destroyed 90-something% of the housing stock in 2005, I believe it was. I was moved to tears. I could not believe that which I saw. And that has been the lived reality of many of us in the Caribbean, and not would, it can happen to any of us. Now, as recently as yesterday, I would have received notice, as you are well aware, Matthew, of another approach taken. And this is now to say, well, we are going to defund USAID, for example, to the tune of a couple $2 billion. And that means that things like the Barbados Blue-Green Bank, which is really about financing sustainability, financing resilience building in this country, is something that we will not be able to benefit from funding assistance with from the United States. Or for example, you may wish to defund the World Trade Organization to $20 million or more, and that limits the capacity of the World Trade Organization to do some of the leveling that they must do if microstates are to trade with mega powers. And there's nowhere on planet Earth that you can get anybody to accept or believe that there is logic if you say that there is a level of tariff applied to Great Britain, which is identical to the tariff applied to Barbados, because Barbados and Great Britain are the same. But that is the world we now live in. and these are the challenges we face. Now, if we are to make sense of this new world, we are not going to be able to do so if we are speaking as a speck in the Caribbean Sea to the world's largest superpower. We're not going to be able to make sense of some of these issues if we speak as a singular rock in the Caribbean Sea to continental Europe. And therefore, it becomes important to recognize that collectively, what is 250,000 people in Barbados, 260-something thousand, must now become a voice of 10 million, the sooner the better, must become a voice of 15 or 20 million, the sooner the better, so that at least we are able to exercise some influence, some weight, and some presence. I read in a history book many years ago that one of the reasons why, after having raped, exploited, pillaged, and done everything that they chose to do, the English decided to abandon sugar industry in the Caribbean, as it then was that we had become useless rocks in the Caribbean Sea. Having been the jewel in the British crown, we became useless rocks in the Caribbean Sea. The truth of the matter is that that perspective today may not be voiced abroad, but it probably is to some extent felt, that outside of one or two possible exceptions, really and truly, we are useless rocks in the Caribbean Sea. Individually, that could and probably is said of us. And I genuinely believe that the rocks in the sea must now find commonality, common purpose, synergy, collective influence, collective strength, collective approaches to solving our collective problems so that we can have a greater presence. Otherwise, it becomes a very difficult proposition to see how, on current trajectory, 15 years from now, we are going to be able to sustain and protect the citizenry of this region and protect the civilization of this region. And that is the real concern that I have as I watch the mood of the world today. And if you think I'm joking, just look at Palestine. I mean, there are a couple million people living in Palestine who call themselves Palestinians. But there are those who will say that Palestine is not a state, should not be a state, and that which now I think most of the world, France is at that point, England is now at that point, much of Europe has finally come, and let me say, in the aftermath of Barbados taking a position a year ago, then followed by Jamaica, then followed by Trinidad and Tobago, Europe has now come to the point where they are also saying we need to recognize this country, Palestine. But at the same time, there are those who will say to you, it's not a state, will not be a state, it is irrelevant, let us move on past that, it is not a topic for conversation. And unless there is unity in these matters and collectivity of voice, then we will insularly begin to fail like dominoes fall one behind the other.
And while we make that effort to come together sensibly, to unite, let us recognize that these so-called rocks in the Caribbean Sea possess a cultural value, a cultural creativity, a moral integrity in their historical journey that surpasses those whose vocation was to plunder, to oppress, to exploit. So let us, even while we recognize the limitations of size and the necessity for us to unify what we have, let us never have any doubt about the value, the cultural, social, artistic, philosophical, spiritual value of our people and of our nations, and of that brilliant history that we have had resisting against the most terrible forces of oppression, preserving our intrinsic humanity and transcending to create in all of these countries. You look at them, you look at this Barbados, you look at all of these, Cuba, look at all Venezuela, all these Caribbean countries, St. Lucia, St. Vincent. places that seek to nurture human beings, seek to places of humanity, you know. So let us never forget who we are and the triumphs of our history. Time is running out on us. I think we can perhaps take one last
I have the mic.
question
Greetings, good
from
evening. I have the mic.
unless Mariel says to us that we have another half an hour, which we don't have. So I think we will have to go with a final intervention from the audience. I see Sister Dr. Chen with the microphone.
Very good.
Dr. Chen, see if you can keep it very concise, please.
I'm going to use your example, of course. I love this. But first and foremost, I'd like to highlight just for a second that everything that has been uttered here, everything that has been shared, I like the term actionable deliverables, because everyone gave us exactly the mapping. You did Afrofuturism, you brought together culture, healing, arts, technology, and spirituality. You went through a realm of linguistics. You were able to show the importance of Carifesta 15 as bringing all of this into a synergy that is essential for Caribbean civilization to really move forward. And for that, I'm very grateful. That was my first part. And the short version is just, when we speak of inclusivity, it's really important when you're speaking of inclusivity that we're speaking of persons with special abilities, persons in current colonies, persons that are under embargoes that are illegal, immoral, and outright inhumane. And it's very important that we hear what this young sister, the youth, had to say right here, that we can have this conversation, and that sometimes it has to go, not sometimes, it has to go beyond the talk. Because that way the young people will feel the seriousness, because they are the spark of transformation. We tend to say the spark of revolution, but these youth are the spark of transformation. Everyone on this panel and in the audience has spoken of reparations. Whether you think it's reparations or not, because it's not just about the money. It's about changing and repairing the relationships that we have with one another. And the only way to do that, actionable deliverables that respect one another. And I do have a message, because while this is being aired live, there was a message from Dr. Humphrey Regis. He sends his regards to you, Dr. Auger, and to you as well, Ambassador Dr. June Sumer. And I think it's important to know these are persons are watching and listening. Persons are asking how can they participate. So whatever publication, rapporteur report comes from this actionable plan that we can move forward, what are we going to do in 24 hours to implement at least one element, one strand of what everyone has said? Thank you very much, and good evening.
I know we're limited for time, but I did want to jump in on something.
No, hold on, Zaida. We're gonna give you and Kimberly closing statements. The three of us have spoken, but the minister just wants to make a quick. You want to make a quick response?
I am not to prejudice in any way what Kimberly wants. Sorry, Zaida wants to say. On this vital matter of inclusivity, I just wanted to come in on that point. And you asked the question, and we often ask the question, I think out of a sense of hopelessness. Well, what do we do? Our lived reality must be something that we hold on to, and that we do not allow our minds to be robbed of, because this is what we have lived, this is what we understand. There is a fundamental and a phenomenal difference between a tiny island like a Barbados or Grenada and a large place like Canada, a large place like Germany. It is possible in those metropolitan countries not to understand that. Give me one example of the need for inclusivity. Same-sex relationships. In Barbados, it is almost impossible not to know of somebody in the village or in the district who was a child of a father that felt ashamed, felt intolerant of his son or his daughter because of their same-sex preference. That child would have been treated in a way that is different to how I was treated when I was growing up. That child would have been treated in a way that made that child perhaps feel unloved and even unwanted. These are realities that we meet in small countries, small islands, on a day-by-day basis. And you can't hide from it because it is right there for all of us to see because we are a small space. It may not be that easy to contend with or to recognize in larger countries. And I think that in many ways, what we have to understand and hold on to is that there is an opportunity for small islands like us to offer the world thought leadership on some of the values which are near and dear to human beings and to humanity feeling, as our Prime Minister likes to say, humanity feeling heard, feeling felt, feeling acknowledged. And very often I sense that what takes place in larger countries is that there is a wave of thought that says you ignore that, pretend it doesn't exist, sweep them out of under the rug and just move on. Not the way in which a world should work. And if it is something that we can do, I believe it is that we can lend thought leadership and principles to the dialogue that takes place internationally so that we recognize that people do matter, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their race, irrespective of sexual orientation. These are things that ought not to be dividing us, but helping us to unite and share and find commonality of perspective as human beings. And I think that's something we must look at.
Have something to share with the world, which we already do. Yes, we want to. I think the time has really run out on us, brothers and sisters, but we want to hear the voices of Zaida and Kimberly to give closing statements.
As I close, I just want to reiterate my points as well as the points of my fellow panelists that were discussed here tonight. There is a need for regional unity. And I had a question I wanted to pose to Minister Simmons was that how do the global leaders, what message are we sending to the youth, especially the youth that are interested in advocacy or they have these questions when we have these pressing regional issues and we go to these larger global powers and these global forces and they say, well, we can help you, but only if you do as we say, or only if you adhere to what the messages that we want to say. Or we can only help you on these terms and on these conditions. And then unfortunately, there would be regions or different territories that they may have no choice, or they may see that the only option there, even if that isn't really the only option, is to bend to the will and do as they say. What message are we sending to the youth that way? That was a question I wanted to pose. I don't think we have time to discuss it now, but we can go back to it. Yes. And I also wanted to touch on the point with my friend in the audience, what she said with actionable deliveries. And even as we leave here today, what is one thing that can be done almost immediately after we leave? And I like your point of the best of Carifestaxv, where we have the top 10 artists and the top 10. While a lot of the topics that we discussed here, they need further thought and discussion and policies involved. I think that is something we can do as soon as we go home. We can have a sit-down meeting with the Carifestaxv social media team, and it can easily be created in 1 or 2 days, and we sit down and we highlight the content, because there is content, there are photos and there are videos. We can sit down and we can go through everything that was documented, and it is not impossible or extremely difficult to say this is the best of Carifestaxv. These were the top 10 best country nights. These were the top 10 poets, stuff like that we need to do. We need to take action. We need to listen to the youth. I also something I wanted to add into your point as well, with the need for skilled. We're calling for inclusion. I'm calling, and all of us here, inclusive education. However, we need to ensure that our teachers and our lecturers have the necessary skills and support and resources that they need to create an inclusive classroom. We can't call for inclusive education if there's nobody skilled and trained to have the inclusive education there. And as I close, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. And I'd like to reiterate that there is more to life than words. We've said enough words, we've done enough talking. There will always be talking. But what we need to do is action. We need to involve the youth, we need to make bold choices, and we need to stick together as one Caribbean, one region to continue to preserve our culture. Good night, everyone.
Zaida, I want to answer on behalf of the minister. I want to steal the minister's thunder. I think what you are saying is that the youth want nations, Caribbean nations, that they can feel proud about. And I'll give you one example. Back in 1972, there were only 4 independent Anglophone Caribbean countries: Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Barbados. These countries in 1972 made a decision, a collective decision. At that time, Cuba, revolutionary Cuba, was totally isolated in this hemisphere. The powerful US government, the powerful Organization of American States said everybody is to isolate Cuba, break all diplomatic relations with them. All the countries of this region, with the exception of Canada and Mexico, broke diplomatic relations. They threw Cuba out of the OAS. These 4 the smallest independent nations of the hemisphere said collectively, the 4 of us are going to recognize Cuba and to establish diplomatic, economic, cultural relations with Cuba. The United States said, no, you cannot, you must not do it. The OAS said no. And the leaders said, look, we are independent nations. We will make our own decisions. And you know what happened? They recognized Cuba against the objections of the OAS and the US State Department. But what happened? They broke the ice, because once they took that position of principle, all the others then fell in line. Everybody else then followed and recognized Cuba. So, yes, we understand we face difficult decisions, we face difficult issues, but there's a core that we must have. There's a core values and principles. And it's not difficult to find that core, because it really comes out of our history of struggle. And I think that's what you were saying, that the young people want to be part of a nation that they can feel proud about. And we totally agree with that ambition. Kimberly?
Okay, thank you. My closing remarks will be brief, very brief. But based on everything that was said by the panel, also some of the questions posed by the persons in the audience, I have a fear that we will repeat history, especially when we heard what the doctor asked for, and then in return, in relation to Barbados joining the OECS, what you said in terms of that was already explored. Then there are other instances when things were tried but failed. And there's one word that, if not the most important word within the trade union movement, that I believe if we take it seriously and we exercise this word to the core and max, is solidarity. Unless we can achieve and maintain and build that solidarity, our actionable results will be zero. This would just be another talk shop at other meetings that we have. But history also shows what was achieved through solidarity. You just gave a prime example. So as a trade unionist, I would love to leave that word with the audience, with the viewers, with the heads, with everybody, the importance and the need for solidarity, because as you recognize, we are, what they say, the chain is as weak or as strong as its weakest link. And if they are seeing us, this region, individually, but then collectively we have a voice, collectively we are seen, collectively we are heard, collectively and with our numbers and so forth, we can step up and we can be recognized. So the doctor would have left 5 words with us. I want to leave 1 word with us. And that word to the end is solidarity. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. And I want to assure everybody that this Carifesta, and I think Mariel will confirm this, has been thoroughly documented. Not just the big conversations. Of course, all the big conversations have been captured on film, on video, but virtually this entire Carifesta has been well documented. So it is for us now, having done the work of documenting it, the question is, how do we use that material now? And so for Carifesta to really fulfill all of its potential, we now have a responsibility to take the next step, having documented it, to use all that material and put together the resource packages that we can share. And in that spirit of solidarity, where we share right across our Caribbean space. But I know time has run out on us. I want to thank the panel. I think the panel did.
Closing statements for everybody.
Yeah, but do we have time, Mariel?
Yeah, make time.
I think that's the problem. Can we allow each of the other panelists a minute? Okay, so we go with Dr. Auger. We then go to Gloria, and we end with Minister Cummins, but Minister Simmons, sorry. But we need to do it. We need to do it very quickly, very concisely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence. And I'm glad I'm in the middle chair here because I feel like I'm the bridge between the youth and the not so youth, which of course. A couple things. Number one, solidarity, we can add to the 5 words. I'll find a way to fit it in. I'm going to work on it tonight. The future is shaped by intent. We need to decide what our intent is. I remember writing and posting not so long ago that the great illusion of contemporary Caribbean thinking is that the struggle is over and it has turned out okay. The struggle is not over and it has not turned out okay. We have a lot of work still to do, and the fragmentation in our societies is leaving us very little choice. The truth is our agendas are merging thanks to not so intelligent statements being made elsewhere. The imperatives are merging. The social, economic, political, environmental, and security imperatives are merging. And what we need to do is find our strengths and recognize them as a zone of peace, as a zone of tolerance, as a zone of enlightenment. There are very few people who have 500 years of non-violent history between themselves. This is a badge of honor, and it shows that together we are capable of many things. The issue, Mr. Ambassador, is not just a unified voice, but a unified market. They are not interested in morality. They are not interested in fairness. They're not interested in justice. They're interested in economic leverage, and that is what we have to discover. 2 ways. One, combine for our external presence, and secondly, combine for our internal survival, strengthening, advancement, and as I said, leapfrogging ahead. Not even catch up, leapfrogging ahead. And that's what I talk about when I say us together at our best. It is not to keep up. It is not to catch up. It is not to be resilient, which is just another word for survival under pressure. I am not interested in that. I am interested in wealth, prosperity, and enlightenment. That is the Caribbean I want.
I think,
yes, I feel all you could clap, yes.
I think that you asked about the material. What are you going to do with all these images and talk? I think that it's very important to spread all this information between our countries. and to spend some resources in translation, in Spanish, in French, in all the language, even in Creole, all the language, because I think that everything that we said here can help and guide many people, guide many leaders, many universities. This material in university must be part of the education. Be part of the education is very important because they can continue talking and establish more deep debate about this. I think that this conversation, of course, is not completed. We have many ideas, but I like the word unity, the word solidarity. Very important. Without these two things, we cannot go very far.
Thank you, Gloria. Minister, final word is yours.
And I know that solidarity has taken on a certain tone, temperature, meaning. I agree with that word, but I want to also offer a different word, which is partnership. I think that Carifesta has taught us a lot about ourselves. This Carifesta, in my judgment, has broken some boundaries that needed to be broken. We have more youth participating than ever before. Youth from across this region have met each other, have built relationships, have started to understand each other's countries, each other's particular cultures, each other's practices, and that is about partnership. I think this Carifesta has also taken us where we were never able to go, deeper into Latin America and into Africa, and that too is about partnership. And if we are able then to draw from these experiences and then to start to talk at long last about monetizing the human resource talent, the human resource creativity of our people, whether that is in film, whether it is in fashion, whether it is in drama, etc., then it opens the floodgates for a whole raft of new economic activities which, when commercialized and monetized, give our people platforms economically that did not exist 20 or 30 years ago. That, I believe, is a fundamental point of departure and a legacy benefit for us in Carifesta. It will mean nothing, however, if at a political level we do not drive harder, push harder to go further and faster and to deepen our integrative effort. You talk about the Eastern Caribbean, I'm with you, but I go further than you. I want to see a political unification of this region. It is not beyond us, and there have been leaders of different countries in my lifetime, many of whom could easily have been the leader of this Caribbean. I don't want to start to call names, but we all know who they could have been. And the reality is that we must not limit ourselves in terms of our ambition. We must be able to dream big dreams in order to move this region to see its fullest potential. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming, for putting up with the humble thoughts of the 5 panelists and the moderator. It has been my benefit and my privilege to take over from the moderator, the closing of the of the panel discussion tonight. This has been a wonderful, big conversation. It has been a privilege to have had you here and to have you participate. I believe this is the first big conversation where we've had the voice of the audience interfacing with the panelists, and that has helped us tremendously. So thank you for your participation. Oh, this is the one where we've had the most, not the very first. But the point is, I think we've all benefited from your input. And I think that as we go forward, now that we've captured all of this on film, it is food for thought, not only from those who were privileged to be sitting here, but also from you who have made vital inputs and valuable contributions to whatever comes out of the assimilation of all of these ideas during the course of tonight as we go into the future. So thanks very much, and
a round of applause for the panel, please, and a round of applause for yourself for being such a wonderful participatory audience.
Carifestaxv.